1 in 10 people in the UK are diagnosed with some form of neurodivergence, a blanket term used to categorise people who have cognitive or behavioural conditions such as autism, ADHD and dyslexia. This documentary explores how neurodivergence is approached within education by interviewing a group of teachers trained in special educational needs. Watch as we unpack the barriers and challenges towards providing support in the classroom by asking them a series of questions to allow them to open up and express the challenges they face on a daily basis in preparing our children for later life.
I'm Lucy, I'm a Year 1 teacher at Newburgh Primary School.
Hello, my name's Lydia, I'm a teacher here at Newburgh Primary School. I teach a class of mixed children Year 1 and 2. I've been teaching for 3 years now.
My name's Sam Kelly, I'm the Head of Computing at the Westwood Academy and I'm actually responsible for teaching all age groups from 11 to 18, so I see them from when they arrive in Year 7 all the way to the end of Year 13.
So my name's Gemma and I currently teach in reception, but I have taught in all year groups apart from Year 5 and Year 6.
In the time you have been teaching, do you feel the number of pupils with additional needs have increased?
Since I've only been teaching for 2 years officially, I've just seen sort of a steady amount of children with needs. What I would say is there is quite a high level of needs, a lot of which is undiagnosed. There isn't necessarily an official label on it because everything does take so long to be processed these days. But of course, my job as a primary school teacher is to figure out what that child's needs are and how best I can meet that so that they're still accessing the curriculum and actually they're learning at the sort of right level for them.
Thinking back to when I was a teaching assistant to now, I feel like every year there's children that are coming up with different needs, different individual needs, different diagnoses, and I do think that is, and it's definitely increased since I became a teaching assistant.
Why do you feel that the additional needs has increased? Is it due to better diagnosis?
So I think I've seen a rise in children with additional needs, mainly because of lack of funding for special schools. There's been a lot of special schools that have closed. So we, as a state school, then have to take children with additional needs, sometimes quite severe needs.
I think it's a really interesting question to think about why the needs have increased, but I do think that it is because of diagnosis. I think that nowadays there is a lot more, it's more spoken about, additional needs. I think there's more research into additional needs. As teachers, as TAs, as support staff in school, we're a lot more aware of the different additional needs that are coming through, which is why I think there are a lot more diagnoses which are being made, which is why we're seeing an increase in children each year having additional needs. I think it's just because of the research and being more aware of it. I think it's a lot more spoken about now than it maybe was 5 to 10 years ago, and there's a lot more research that's being carried out and training for us as teachers. We have loads of CPD on how to support children with additional needs, which is why I think that it is because of people being more aware of it, that's why we're seeing an increase.
So what's the total number of pupils you have in your class and how many of them have additional needs?
So in terms of Westwood, we have ability sets. So students at higher ability will usually be taught in sets of as high as 32, which is a huge number for a single room, with lower ability groups being taught generally between 10 to 20. The issue that we're facing a lot at the moment within public education, where we are working at the whims of government budgets, is we're actually finding we're having a lot of issues with having students with additional needs in middle sets of 30, 32 students, but not being given the time to appropriately address those students' needs. It also leaves me as a teacher with a concern of how many of those students aren't being picked up because the teacher is running around trying to keep track of 32 students and noticing something as minor as perhaps an issue with reading or a persistent issue with spelling. It's not going to be picked up until much later in their education, where it might be too late for a diagnosis and specific support.
So officially I sort of teach 33 children in a morning, but if I'm thinking more about my core class of 23, then I'd say about 5 definitely have additional needs. Primarily, they're sort of speech based, which is quite interesting actually, because obviously these children are sort of COVID babies. You know, maybe they haven't had a social sort of nursery setting because of all the lockdowns, etc. Or maybe, you know, even prior to that, they haven't had the opportunities to go to mother and baby clubs or, you know, stay in play sessions that of course develop speech. I've got a little girl who's definitely on the spectrum. She's got elements of ADHD, I believe, as well, just lack of attention, you know, sort of getting her to focus on one activity is very, very difficult. And also she has a sensory diet as well. So in order for her to access the learning, I need to meet her sensory needs. So that requires, you know, things like, does she have a wobble cushion under her feet? Is she sitting on a wobble cushion? Does she have, I've got something called a TheraBand that goes over the chair legs as well, and she puts her feet in to give her a bit of resistance as she's writing. You know, things like, has she, you know, does she engage in sort of do disco to develop a fine motor and keep herself, you know, actively touching different textures. So it's quite diverse, but they're all lovely children, and it's just about how can I best facilitate their learning. So yeah, that's my job.
At this school we have a Senko who works here, and she visits us on a termly basis where we sit down with her and we go through all the children in the class. We look at how they're getting on, if I have any concerns of any children that I would like to raise with her. Also, we talk through the children who have already been diagnosed with those additional needs, and we just go through how they're getting on, where they're currently working, is there anything else that we need to put in place for them. She's also available for us to go to on a daily basis, so if there is something that I think, oh no, I really need a wobble cushion or a fidget toy, I can just go and see her, and she's got loads in her room that we can just go and take. So that's really good that I feel that I can just go and see her, even if it's just a conversation, to say, okay, this isn't working, do you have any strategies or any ideas? And we try and work through that together. And then also some of the children in my class, I have external people who come out, so external agencies will come into the classroom, and they'll work with those children as well. So I always have the opportunity to have a talk with them after they've been in, and we have a discussion together to see if there's anything that I can be doing to support them. Is there any apps? Because quite often you can get apps on the iPad which are really good that we can use in the classroom. So we have I'm quite lucky that we've got the Senko, but also some of the children have their external agencies who come in as well, so we can share loads of knowledge with them and let me know more of how I can support the children.
We monitor progress for children with additional needs through regular assessments, which is exactly the same as what we would do with the rest of the class, but the assessments might be adapted slightly, so it might be a bigger sheet, or it might be that we read some of the questions to the children. We also meet with the Senko and we review the children's individual targets, which is on their EHCP, so or their IEP, which is like an individual plan of objectives and targets that we just check that the children are making some kind of progress towards those.
What impact does having pupils with additional needs have on the rest of the class?
So I think, as we've previously discussed, for the small groups, we have, for example, here Group 7. Group 7 is very low ability. Every student there has a special educational need. And as a result, even though they sit the same tests as everyone else, they on occasion will often compete at and even outperform on occasion sets 6 and 5. And that is because they are receiving specialist support. I'm aware of every student's need in that class, every student's personality in that class, and the details of why they have the certain needs they do, which puts me in an extremely strong position to support those students. In my opinion, we really need to start seeing better support for allowing TAs to be paid a reasonable living wage and start seeing TA numbers increased across schools in the UK, especially in schools where there are high SEN needs.
I love my job, you know, it is a very difficult job, you know, and I'm sure many people will tell you that, but actually for me, the good outweighs the bad massively, and actually I wouldn't change anything about it, apart from maybe teacher workload. But, you know, actively being in the class every day with so many little, you know, individuals and being their leader is a real privilege. So that's why I love teaching, and you know, long may it continue.